So I'm driving home from the lake the other day, and I start hearing some crazy noise coming from the boat trailer. It sounded like a flat tire, kinda, but I could see both trailer tires in my mirrors, and they appeared to be fully inflated. But a minute later, a guy comes driving up next to me in the next lane and hollers something about my tire. So I pull over to inspect, and this is what I see. Much to my surprise, a big hunk of treads had peeled completely off the tire, exposing a bunch of steel belting. I'd never seen anything like it. A solid 8 or 10 inches of tread just gone. The craziest part to me was that the rest of the tire wasn't punctured or deflated. I was pretty close to home at this point, so I decided to carefully go the rest of the way and hope for the best. And I made it home without the tire ever deflating. Missing tread, gnarled steel wires poking every which way. Incredible. Well, I'd been planning on replacing these tires pretty soon anyway, so no time like the present. Now, I considered getting just the tires replaced, but after calculating the total cost of tires and installation, and after thinking about the hassle of taking both wheels off and bringing them to a tire place and waiting God knows how long, it became very clear that buying entirely new wheels was the better option. Way easier, faster, and the cost is practically the same. Plus, I'm getting brand new rims this way, and now I'll even have an old spare tire. I bought this set of tires, including wheels, online for about $160. They sell them on Walmart and Amazon. I got them from Amazon, and they were on my doorstep 2 days later. Can't really beat that. The operation for changing these tires isn't much different than changing a tire on a car. Though, since I have only 2 wheels and no brakes or transmission, I need to take extra care to make sure that the trailer doesn't start rolling when I jack up one side. So I'll chock the tire that I'm not currently working on, and I could have also just hooked up the hitch to my truck, which would ensure that it couldn't roll anywhere, but I found this to be sufficient as long as I didn't go crazy with the tire iron. This floor jack will make very quick work of this whole thing, but a cheapo scissor jack would work too. Note that I'm jacking up the trailer from its frame just behind the wheel. You never want to put the jack on an axle for trailers, cars, or anything. You'll bend an axle doing this. So just go with a very sturdy part of the frame, pretty much as close to the wheel as possible. I'll get the jack in place and start to raise the trailer just slightly, but not so much that the wheel can turn freely yet, because I still need to break those lug nuts free and I don't want the wheel moving. These wheels are pretty old and the lug nuts haven't been unscrewed in ages, so I'm going to use my biggest breaker bar to break those lug nuts free. A good crisscross tire iron would have worked too, but I can get more leverage with this breaker bar. Once the lug nuts are broken, that is, once they're loosened just slightly and no longer stuck in their most tightened original position, I'll jack the trailer up the rest of the way, just high enough for the wheel to be able to turn freely. And just for an extra layer of safety, I'll put a jack stand under the trailer frame. This jack stand isn't perfectly fit or made for a trailer frame, but it's still going to prevent the trailer from falling down should anything happen to the jack. I'm not working under the trailer, so the jack stand could be considered unnecessary, but I'd rather be safe than sorry when it comes to this sort of thing. Then I'm just unscrewing all those lug nuts the rest of the way. I'll use the impact wrench because it's super quick, but a regular wrench or tire iron is just fine if you don't have one. Now the tire will pop right off, and I can get an even better look at the crazy damage on this thing. Not that it really matters at this point. Now I'll slap the new tire on, making sure that the valve stem is facing out. That is the little nipple that you use to fill the tire with air. If you don't see that valve stem, you've probably put the wheel on the wrong way. Then I'll screw each lug nut on with my fingers, just a couple turns to make sure the wheel can't come off. And now to tighten the lug nuts. Again, I'll use the impact wrench at this point, but any wrench or tire iron is fine. What I need to do is tighten them in a crisscross pattern. This ensures that the wheel seats evenly against the backstop. If I go around in a circle tightening them, it can end up crooked. So I'll just go in basically a star pattern. I'll go just a little at a time on each lug nut and get them each slightly snug with the impact wrench. And then I'll move back to my breaker bar to finish tightening. But first I need to let the trailer down just a little bit so the wheel is once again against the ground enough that it won't spin. When they're all tightened up, I'll lower the jack completely, and I like to check each lug nut one more time to make sure they're good and tight. I'm not trying to crank them down with absolutely all of my strength, but I want to make sure they're reasonably snug so they can't possibly wiggle loose. They should be pretty tight, but not so tight that you'll never get them off again. And that side is done. Now I'll do the other side exactly the same way. Chock the opposite wheel, get the jack in place, break those lug nuts, jack it up until the wheel moves, put my jack stand in place, remove the lug nuts, pull off the old wheel, put on the new wheel, get the lug nuts back in place, tighten them in a crisscross pattern, lower the jack a bit, tighten it all up with a breaker bar, lower the trailer the rest of the way, one final tighten on the lug nuts, and all done. And earlier I mentioned getting a spare tire out of the deal. Well, I still have the non-destroyed old tire. No clue if it could suffer the same fate as its brother, but it's better than nothing for an essentially free spare. So I got one of these little brackets for about $10, and I'm just going to mount this thing to the front of the trailer. I'll mention that this thing should have come with a couple washers because the nuts themselves were a tiny bit too narrow, but I had a couple spare washers and that took care of the problem. Now this spare tire is firmly mounted in place, pretty well out of the way. I do, however, have to remember to keep a wrench handy to remove these two mounting nuts should I ever need it. And the last thing I'll do is check the air in each tire, including that old spare, with the pressure gauge. These brand new tires are actually slightly too full of air, so I'll let a little bit of air out until they're just right at the recommended PSI. So that's about it. A pretty simple tire swapping operation, and I'll put links in the video description to the tires I bought and other stuff I used in this video. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date on all our latest stuff. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Great Lakes Prepping.